Hello everybody, welcome back to Hive Prometheus. This will be episode 3 of the Tyranid Masterclass. Today I want to be going over some things such as setting up your list specifically with tech pieces or units that will help you score primary and secondary. We will be going over every single one of the secondaries. There are 16 in total, and we will be putting in the units that we think are best in general for scoring those. It'll vary on the list, but it'll be sort of expansive, and you'll be able to titrate down and pick the units that work best for you based on your Hive fleet and your unit composition. I'll go through some brief tactics such as move blocking with chaff units, things that are easily thrown away but can give you time to score primary, specifically against things that you can deal with move-wise or toughness-wise. Additionally, I want to touch upon things that you can use to set up traps via rapid ingress, deep strike, or reserves. And lastly, units that you can use to steal objectives to flip the primary 5 or 10 points at a time, other than using Shadow on the Warp. So, to talk about primary, I think the things that are going to be mostly helpful for you are going to be cheap things with high OC. Those are going to be smaller units like Gargoyles, Hormagaunts, Termagants, and Warriors. Those are all OC2. Medium and higher OC monsters. You can see in OC3, we actually have a majority of our units there. Hive Tyrant, Swarmlord, Old One-Eye, Carnifexes, the Neurotyrants, Screamer Killers, and Psychophages. Depending on the detachment that you're bringing, you're probably not seeing Psychophages a whole lot unless you're running Assimilation Swarm. In OC4, we do see Toxicrins, Maleceptors, Haruspexes, Molochs, Trigons, and Exocrins. You will see about 3/4 of these units fielded in a multitude of lists. The only thing right now that probably is not is the Toxicrin, because it's 200 points, and it is teched to be anti-elite infantry. So if Custodes was really a problem for us, that would probably be something that we could use. However, for the profile and defensively, I don't see it being taken unless it's 145 points or less. So it needs a drastic drop in points to be seen more often. At OC5, we see Tyranid, Termagants, and Norn Emissaries. If you did not choose the singular purpose special rule to be for an objective in the midfield, another option for singular purpose is to pick a unit on the field, and for the rest of the game, you have full rerolls to hit and to wound. Tyranid, I think, are still very good. Instead of bringing 2 of them now, I'm bringing 1. I'll field them normally in a Synaptic Nexus, Invasion, even a Vanguard detachment now I'm playing with. Termagants, I haven't even fielded this edition. I have not played Swarm, but a lot of people have found some relative success with her. And the Norn Emissary is, I would say, probably a mid to high B tier unit depending on the detachment that you use. You are going to see those. They're a little costly right now for what they do. However, they're one of our better tech pieces for holding primary, specifically for the next line. If you choose singular purpose for an objective in the midfield, you turn its OC5 into OC15. As long as it's on that objective, it also has a 5+ Feel No Pain. However, for the OC15, I think it does wildly well if it's just left alone, but you're paying 290 or 310 points, depending if you take the Emissary or the Assimilator, to sit on a point. And you're kind of hoping things just funnel to you and you have enough to deal with whatever's coming towards you. But if it's anything that is clearly bigger and stronger than you, a Primarch of sorts, the Lion or Magnus the Red, they're going to swipe you and they're going to take you right off. So the way you play them has to be, in my opinion, I don't throw my emissaries on the center objective. I throw them to the sides, and I kind of focus the majority of my firepower and things to keep my opponent off the middle objective. And then that gives them a choice. Do they want to devote their resources to move further to one of the side objectives, or are they going to fight me in the middle? And the majority of the time, my opponent just sees it as a hassle to have to move potentially 2 movement phases, one of which is probably going to be hiding and not shooting or not charging to get to one of the Norn Emissaries. So the opportunity cost or the loss for them is far too much, and they'd rather just funnel in and fight the middle. So here I've written out all 16 of the secondaries. You can find the Leviathan secondary deck for Leviathan GT pack. And I've gone through and I've very quickly given some of my best units that could go and complete these objectives. You're going to see a lot of repeats. I might have forgotten some best case scenarios. For extended battle lines, you probably just want anything that's going to out-OC your opponent. You could do this very cheaply with things like Gargoyles or Gaunts. They move quick. Gargoyles especially have Assault. They can advance and still shoot and do their 6-inch move. They have a potential maximum movement of 24 inches. They don't need it to engage the enemy. What you could do in theory is if there's a 5-man squad of Marines on there that have OC 10, they don't take up a very large footprint. A 24-inch move can get you pretty much encompassing all of the area that they are not on the objective outside of 1 inch. And I'm pretty confident that even with potential overwatch, you can have 14 or 15 of those gargoyles still alive and take that point for a total OC of 30 or so. For deploy teleport homer, one of the easiest ones, you want to do this in your opponent's deployment zone. It's worth 5 points. I believe instead of 3 points if you're playing tactical, if you deploy in the middle. A Biovore can do this very easily. A spawn spore mine can still score points. There's some conjecture on whether or not that's going to change in the next data slate. But for right now, they've made it so that only 1 Biovore can seed per turn, and it's 75 points instead of 40. I think design-wise, they kind of have it at a point that they want, where we can score secondaries easily, and our primary game has to be a focal point in order for us to win games a majority of the time. Rippers, Raveners, or Gargoyles are all cheap. Rippers are 20 points for a single 40 mil base. Raveners are 75 points. Gargoyles are 2. They both deep strike, and they have different roles. Gargoyles, a majority of the time, are screeners, an annoyance. They're endless multitude, so in invasion or in swarm, you can bring them back for a CP or 2. Raveners I see as sort of flankers or strikers. They can take out some light resistance, scouts or Marines. Not consistently, sure, it's probably only about a 40 or 50% chance that they wipe a squad of 5 Marines, but 21 attacks in a squad of 3 at strength 5, AP1 for 1 twin linked still has a pretty high damage output. Even on the charge, if you only leave 1 or 2 Marines alive, they're probably not even killing a Ravener back. Similar for our next one, investigate signals. Biovore, Rippers, Raveners, and Gargoyles, and even Lictors, because they're free rapid ingress coming in from the edge. These are incredible, cheap units to get you an easy 4 to 8 points on investigate signals. This is one of the few that I think that we could max the 8 on, other than potentially capture enemy outposts, and I'll explain that later. It's 2 points per table quarter. Assuming you don't draw this on the first turn, you kind of want to position your units. Your Biovore, I think in theory, no. You want to position your units so that potentially on the first turn, the least amount of points you could get is 4. If you have Raveners on the table, specifically an invasion fleet or some other detachment, you could burrow them on your enemy's turn 1 and at the bottom of your turn 1. You can deep strike them again. Most opponents are not going to be able to screen 3 corners of the table. A Biovore seeding a mine, a Neurotyrant in the back line moving back to your corner deployment, some Gargoyles moving 24 inches up a side, and then a Ravener deep striking potentially can get you in a full 6 or 8 points for investigate signals. It's a high scoring one. It's one I tech into pretty hard because a lot of other people do not. Whenever that card comes up for a lot of people, they save it for the CP burn at the end of the turn playing tactical, or they get 2 points for moving something that was already in their deployment zone back to their own corner. There is a caveat here. You do have to be wholly within 9 inches of a corner. So things with high movement, Raveners moving 10 and Gargoyles moving 12, Lictors moving 8, I believe, are fantastic, cheap candidates. We do extremely well when it comes to spreading out and capturing points on the board. Assassinate is something that you have to devote a bit more energy towards. Death Leaper and Lictors all have precision, so do Neurolictors. Units in Vanguard Assault can actually get precision for a command point, and I believe that is a battle tactic. So if you have a Winged Hive Tyrant or a Hive Tyrant, you can use that using the Hive Mind for free. I usually get Assassinate whenever I play Necrons, Space Marines. Depending on the faction you're playing, Assassinate can be difficult. If you're playing something like Custodes, you're probably not killing a Custodian character with a Lictor, but things like Astra Militarum or Necrons who have small characters, T4, 4 wounds, Death Leaper or a Lictor with some okay rolling can take those out. We're going to no prisoners. We want to be taking units that are going to have a higher consistent damage output. Sure, Tyranid damage is about 16 to 20% lower than any other datasheet point for point. However, things like Maleceptors, Exocrines, Harspexes, Old One-Eye, Carnifexes, Gene Stealers, Winged Tyranid Prime with Warriors, Raveners, etc. These things that can be sort of your hammers. They can be your strikers. I won't go through the individual stats of these units, assuming you have an index or codex with you, but in my opinion, these are things that for the point cost have a respectable amount of damage output. Similarly, you're going to see a lot of those same units Probably completing Bring It Down just because of the strength of the weapons. Maleceptor's shooting is strength 10, Exocrine is strength 8, Haruspex has strength 14 and strength 7 melee attacks. Old One, I believe, also has strength 14 attacks. Gene Stealers with a Broodlord have devastating wounds, so they can do some chip damage. Things up to toughness 7 just because of the strength 4 on the Gene Stealers. On average, a full squad of 10 Gene Stealers and a Broodlord, I think, are putting about 10 to 13 wounds with devastating wounds onto a vehicle. Wing-Tiered Prime and Warriors, although being a little slower, do have a better damage output just because of twin linked. Going to the opposite front of that, Defense Stronghold. A lot of things that I normally have in the back of my board are a Neurotyrant, a Biovore, a Pyrovore, some Gaunts, and I know of people who are running Endless Swarm right now. A Turvagon would probably be pretty close to the back side of the board on the first or second turn. You cannot score Defense Stronghold on the first turn. If you do, you have to throw it back in your deck and reshuffle. It's a consistent 3 points. It's easy. I would only realistically discard this if you are in a tied game and you kind of need another secondary objective that you could potentially score 5 to get those 2 points as an edge. Engaged on all fronts, you're going to see very similar units that you would have seen for Investigate Signals. It's things that can either move out or shoot a Spore Mine out to the corners of the board. Biovore, Rippers, Raveners, Gargoyles. Harspexes are going to be wanting to move up the board and go eat things anyway. And Gene Stealers who have a scout move and are probably going to be in a different quarter of the board than where they started on the first or second turn anyway. Secure No Man's Land, you have to just secure 2 No Man's Lands objectives in the center of the board. I believe if you only hold 1 or 3 points, if you hold 2, it's the full 5. At this point, if you are running things such as Norn Emissaries, hopefully you've sent one to a flanking corner objective. And one of them is just holding it down. One objective I kind of designate as the fighting objective, one that you're kind of having that ebb and flow or that fight to control. And then another one, depending if it's your forfeit objective or it's a flank that you forfeited, it can be something that you can look at the circumstance and see if it's worth putting something like Gargoyles Deep Striking to try to shoot, move the 6 inches, and then out OC the opponent on that objective. Storm Hostile Objective, again, you're going to want things that are going to kill things on objectives. If you get this early in the game, sometimes you're going to only have 1 or 2 units or enemy units on the objectives. In my game with Necrons like this last Saturday, it was the Silent King, and it was a squad of Immortals, and I thought, well, in all of my games, I don't think I've killed the Silent King, so I might as well go just send everything I have. I had a Winged Hive Tyrant, 2 squads of Broodlord attached to Gene Stealers, and I just put them all into the Immortals. I wiped them all, so I did end up getting a full Storm Hostile objective there. For Area Denial, I was actually able to do something kind of funny with the Biovore on my previous game with Necrons this past Saturday. With the Biovore, with a seated unit, the Spore Mine does count as a unit that can be within 6 inches of the battlefield. You do not need to hold the objective. You also just need no enemy units in the middle. I was originally able to use that on my first turn to body block the Silent King from advancing onto the center objective, and he was outside 6. So using Spore Mine, which was something I felt like was a lot easier to forfeit, totally fine. You can do that. Otherwise, you want things that are going to move fast and move block. Gargoyles are another perfect example. Even if you have them behind a building in your deployment zone, they're going to be able to fly out as infantry, move through buildings, shoot the closest thing. It doesn't even matter if you put wounds on them, and then screen out and move an additional 6 inches. So you could potentially position it so that they're at the edge of the 6 inches of the center of the battlefield, but also screening off the center so that anything that comes towards the middle to try to score primary has to kill them first before attempting to go to the middle. It will postpone them for a turn. Lictors, again, with lone operative and not being able to be targeted outside of 12 inches. Additionally, with stealth, the -1 to hit, it makes them a good candidate for staying alive, and they can just tow into that objective if you want to try to capture that. In the home stretch here, going to attempting target, this ends up being one that is very difficult for me. I don't know if it is for other Tyranid players, but normally if there is a refused flank of mine, your opponent is going to choose that objective for you to try to capture. It's 5 points if you capture that objective that turn. Otherwise, this is something that I normally will just save for a CP or flip it at the end of a turn. It's not something to me that I think is worth keeping multiple turns. You pull it, if you can get it, you pounce on the opportunity. If you can't, you throw it away. Cleanse, you can do with anything. However, I think things that do this very well are Neurolictors, Lictors, and Gargoyles. They're things that are of little consequence output melee-wise or shooting-wise, but their utility and potential defensive profile outweigh their effectiveness in lost attacks. Lictors are sort of your scalpel to try to go get characters. Lictors also with their loan up make it so that they're not a target of opportunity to any guns outside of 12. And gargoyles are kind of there to die anyway. They're our most usefulest idiots. And last but not least, capture enemy outpost. This is something that I think as Tyranids, this is Gargoyle's dream job. This is your opponent has pushed his scouts or his 5-man attack squad up into a building closest to the midfield. He's left a large amount of the backfield objective open. You deep strike your gargoyles outside 9. You shoot them and you move 6 inches and you get 3 or 4 or 5. Potentially more of your gargoyles on there. Worst case scenario, you're matching their OC and you're making so that your opponent can't score the next turn. That's what you want. At best case scenario, you out OC them by 2 or more, and now they have to focus on killing those gargoyles. If you're playing a detachment such as Endless Swarm or Invasion and they do not kill the whole squad, I have had games where I've spent that CP to regen the gargoyles before they have to take Battle Shock, and they regen back to full, and they have OC 20 on their home objective, and it's a 10-point swing over 2 turns because they don't score that primary. Things that also will just throw a wrench in people's plans is a Trigon. It's OC 4, so it's not going to be out OCing things that have a 5-man squad of OC 1. However, if in the preceding turn your opponent does nothing to deal with it, especially if it's hidden behind one of their L-shaped buildings, there are very few things. Oh, I should say specifically why it's going to be hard to deal with them. They deep strike outside 3 inches. So in 9th edition, that was the Moloch's job. Now the Trigon can do that. So Trigon comes in, deep strikes outside of 3, OC 4, big monstrous creature. Now they have to deal with it. Gene Stealers also have a high enough speed to get to the backboard, assuming they don't die into something in the midfield, which has been my experience thus far, but I do potentially see them getting back there. The only other time I will add as a caveat that I've had this work was a squad of Raveners that had a lucky charge, had a great melee round. I had sustained hits with Invasion, and I killed a 5-man attack squad of Marines, and I took the enemy outpost. On average, that's not going to happen. However, fortune rewards the bold, and in that case, it ended up working out. So now what I'll do is I will pull up some pictures of some old games that I had, and I'll try to find ones in which I had situations where I did have deep strikers or reserves or things coming from rapid ingress to set up traps for the enemy. In the case I didn't bring those units, such as gargoyles, old one-eye, things that you would reserve, or a Trigon, I will show a board state in which it would make sense to come in from a certain angle at a certain time, and why. Okay, so here you can see the first turn of a game that I had against Dark Angels. I think this was only about a month or 6 weeks into 10th edition. This was the map where we have deployment zones that go from halfway up our board edge to the corner. So it would look something like this. With the way I set up my units here, this was one of the few games that I played with a Saya Tyranid. I just wanted to see, or maybe I was practicing a Barb Tyranid, can't remember. In the corner here, you can see that I have a Trigon in reserve, and I think I have some Gargoyles and Raveners. This was sort of a experimental invasion list at this point. If I did have Old One-Eye or Carnifexes or something that I would want to rapid ingress, I probably want to keep it away from the Land Raider right here. That was one of the Flamer variants. I honestly would want to bring him in right here. That way on my turn, once he's done, you can move and advance them kind of up this way. If they do end up overwatching, hopefully the Carnifex ends up soaking the damage. With Blistering Assault, you could probably get them on average somewhere around here. And then with a charge, you'd be able to get them into any surviving Hellblasters here. Hellblasters, again, probably not a thing that you want Old One-Eye to go into, because on a 3-up, they shoot when they die. But for other Marines, that's fine. If I had Gargoyles, I would probably want to be flying those up, probably from behind the building here, up this way towards the Land Raider. And you would want to completely encompass it just outside 1. Now, I wouldn't do this for a variant that has the flamethrowers. You'd probably want to do it with one that just has bolters. So even if you overwatch, you got a couple lucky shots. Out of the 10 gargoyles there, probably 7 still exist, and you can space them out evenly so that he has to kill those before he can move. Anything on the first or second turn that is kind of a problem unit that either has high movement, high toughness, or guns that are going to take the center field, kind of like how my Tyranid has here. As for things that you could also rapid ingress, Haruspexes, you know, in the off chance that you have three Maleceptors and don't want them on a board edge. Additionally, if you have a very crowded board and don't have the type of deployment zone to set up three exocrines and have the movement or firing lines that you want, reserving one of those to come in from a better firing angle, potentially here in the corner, give you firing lines looking out on his back and then this way as well. So it gives you options on how much of the board you can cover with overlapping layers of fire. Now in this game, as I remind you, I did have that Trigon in reserve. I was able to put it right here on his home objective. There was a tac squad of Marines right here in the building. They came in and tried to deal with him on their preceding shooting phase. They were unable to. I was able to charge the Marines, killed 3 of them, and now I matched his OC 4 and his OC 4 on his 2 Marines. At that point, the Hell Blasters were gone. The Land Raider was gone. He had something else in there that I was able to deal with additionally, but this game did not make me feel too afraid of Marines. I have not played Marines since, so I do hear that the Iron Storm and the Firestorm detachments specifically are a bit tough. I will probably have to rematch this Dark Angels player to kind of get a sense of what that feels like right now. Here is another game. This is just before turn 1 against one of my sparring partners here in Kansas. He plays Necrons. I did have Gargoyles on this list, but my go-to is usually to throw them off the board. I think this might have been player plays terrain. Part of the reason why the buildings here were exactly 4 inches apart, and our deployment style was very cagey. This was a practice game just to show him player plays terrain. That would be something I'll cover in a later video. But in the case that I did have Gargoyles on the board, I probably would have swapped the places for the Genestealers and the Broodlord, who are seen down here. I would have put them probably in a similar place. I did end up getting first turn. I end up advancing all of these units right here up this way, try to grab cover over here. In order to move block with Gargoyles, now there's a couple units here that I historically have just not been able to deal with. Using Gargoyles, you easily have an 18-inch move with a 6-inch advance about here. You can shoot. And the 2 things that I really want to cover the movement here are the Doomsday Arc and the Silent King. So placing your Gargoyles in an array like this, you're probably going to eat some Overwatch from the Warriors here, but that's okay. You want to cover this area right here. You do not want the Silent King or the Doomsday Arc coming further this way, because that would threaten the line of sight that I had for all those monsters up here. Now, again, on this game, I did get first turn, so I was able to scout my Genestealers up 8 inches this way. I moved them there 8 inches, and I decided that the only thing that I realistically could get a charge on was the Doomsday Arc. I kind of wanted it gone. I had a Hail Mary charge. I did end up getting into the Doomsday Arc. I did end up killing it, and I think I consolidated back into this squad of Immortals back here. 5-man squad of Tesla Immortals. The rest of his army kind of converged and was able to shoot back and wipe them out. But at that point, I had already gotten a big, scary tech piece of his off the board, which I was totally okay with. And as a last example here, this was the board state for turn 1 against Chaos Knights. I think this was about a month into 10th edition. At this point, I was just kind of titrating down to the best invasion list I could make. I had settled on 2 Tyranid fixes, 2 Biovores, a Walking Hive Tyrant, 2 sets of Raveners, 2 sets of 10 Gargoyles, a Maleceptor, a Haruspex, 2 Lictors, and then the 2 Exocrines there if I haven't mentioned that already. I did get turn 1, in which case I was able to pump most of my big shots into the big knight back here. I think I brought him down to 4 or killed him. I can't quite remember. If this was a game that I did have Gargoyles on the board, probably would want to position them something like this with a fly and their large move. They could easily get to probably about here with an advance. And then with with their shots, they probably could move somewhere around here to move block. And I think that was something that I ended up doing, but I ended up deep striking them first. I was really afraid that the War Dogs were going to come straight down the line and engage my stuff in melee. So what I think I ended up doing was I did deep strike here, shot, and then moved on to the objective and tried to steal. My Raveners were the ones that ended up going out to the sides of the boards to score investigate signals. The only thing that ended up being kind of a weird thing for him was he had a squad of Nurglings over here that I never killed and was just to screen me out. On this map, if I had something to rapid ingress like Old One Eye or a Carnifex, I would definitely want to put him down here behind this rock. You have two large pieces of terrain here that are going to give you line of sight blocking. On your preceding turn, you can get him right about here. If he does Overwatch, Blistering Assault gets you closer. If this Warthog is not the target that you're looking to charge at, if you come in with a rapid ingress target, you could move probably around here. And then if he does Overwatch, you could get a Blistering Assault here, and you could try a Long Bomb charge to the middle. So there are options. In my opinion, using Rapid Ingress should be something that throws a wrench in your enemy's battle plan. It should be something that, if they're already dealing with target saturation, that you add a little extra something that taxes their memory and taxes their overall plan. This was supply drop, and I only ended up winning by 2 points. The objective that ended up being the winning objective was this one. So I eventually had to get to the point where I was advancing and moving all of my big shooters this way, and I think it took 2 full turns to get them over here and tow in onto the objective. And the only reason I was able to hold it for 1 turn was I had the Hive Tyrant, the Tyranid and Gargoyles here. So OC3 plus 5 plus whatever Gargoyles were left, contesting the Armiger, the character Armiger, and one of the other Armigers that swept over and around. So close game, but it was a good one. One unit I've been forgetting to mention as a potential target for a rapid ingress is a squad of 3 or 6 zoanthropes. Because of their slow speed and because of their point increase from 90 to 110 points for 3, their efficacy has been middling or average. A lot of people I see are cutting down the number of zoanthropes in their list. 5-inch movement and 24-inch range makes it really difficult for longer deployment types or where there is crowded buildings. So if there's a possibility that your zoanthropes are not going to have a target to shoot at for 1 or 2 turns, putting them in reserves and finding a better angle of opportunity to fire at something that you wouldn't have had an opportunity for potentially the entire game is worth it. I don't know if I would rapid ingress a squad of 3. If it was a squad of 6, their footprint is small enough that you could probably hide them behind pieces of terrain, such that I showed you in those battle reports photos. But a squad of 3, especially if there's 2 squads of 3 and you threw them off the board, you could just have them come on different board edges and be a ranged threat to stuff that kind of wants to sit and camp on objectives. Maleceptors, Norn emissaries, lictors, gargoyles around, or things such as that. They can be a force multiplier to help the useful idiots that just want to sit and score for you. So I want to thank everyone for returning and watching another episode in this Master Series of Tyranid Tactica. If you think there's anything I've missed, you can hit me up in the Discord, the Tyranid Discord for the Tyranid Hive, or ask in the comments. As always, I hope you learned something, and thank you for watching here on Hive Fleet Prometheus.